Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the premiere episode of Frankly Speaking. I am your host, Franklin Richards, and today I am honored to bring on our first guest. He is a voice actor unlike any other. He has voiced many, many voices throughout my childhood, as I'm sure many of you who grew up in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s will know, as well as those who are, of course, Kingdom Hearts fans, as the voice of Xemnas. So, of course, Mr. Paul St. Peter. Paul, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Hey everyone, it's my pleasure and my honor to be here.
So, Paul, of course, with everything going on with COVID-19, how are you, sir? How have things been since the quarantine and everything else? How have things been for you?
Generally speaking, I've been okay. I've been smart about staying home. Um, I wear the mask. At first, I was wearing the gloves. They're not so worried about that, but avoiding the big crowds. And luckily, because I was able to set up a recording booth here at home and got the expert advice of a fellow actor in setting things up, I've been able to work at home quite a bit, from live action to anime to games and even public service agreement.
That's absolutely fantastic. So we have to ask about your early career. We have to know what got you started into voice acting. Like, was voice acting ever something that you had considered right from the get-go, or did you do stage work or anything previously before jumping into this kind of work?
Well, I did stage work in San Diego. Um, I started in junior theater when I was 15 years old, and unbeknownst to me, they mostly did musicals, and I had never sung before. So I got up and auditioned with a song, and the director said, "Well, Paul has a nice bass voice." I became a bass that day. So by 4 years later, by just kind of stumbling forward, doing musicals, I had done the Civic Light Opera, and I was approached to be in the chorus of the San Diego Opera Company. Uh,
Wow,
for a guy that never had a voice lesson, that was pretty impressive. Um, I don't know.
absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
luckily, I have a good ear for sound, and I have what I call a musical memory. I can remember chords and I can remember harmonies and things like that. So in that sense, I'm a better musician than I deserve to be because I never took the classes and learned. So when it
Right.
came to reading music, there were things that I knew. Um, if I spotted a glissando, I knew what we needed to do there. I knew what a fermata meant. You had to do this and this and this. So there were things I picked up along the way. But learning things like every good boy deserves favor on the musical scale, I didn't know that stuff till much, much later. Uh,
Wow.
but
Well,
I never,
so
I
we
did
have
mean that I did start with the theater, yes.
right.
Coming to Los Angeles was when I was approached about doing more voiceover work. What had happened was I studied accents and dialects just as a part of my craft as a stage actor. And
Absolutely.
because of that, people heard me and knew what I could do. And they also heard my voice and said, "You have a good voice for this. Why don't you come and audition for us?" And that's how I got onto Robotech, which was my very first series in 1985.
I was actually about to ask what was the first project that you got into, and maybe could you talk us through some of your early career as a voice actor?
Well, I had been approached about doing the voice work on the anime there, just in terms of being a character on a series. I've done other things like commercials and whatnot,
Right.
but that's been the meat and potatoes of what I've done if you just want to look at the volume of work over the decades. And early on, I was stumbling through, trying to find my way. I had never done this before, I'd never taken a workshop.
Right.
Um, I was doing everything right without knowing it. Um, so as I was working on a session, for instance, as Zor Prime in Robotech, I hadn't done this before. I hadn't been in front of the mic before. So the
Oh,
director
okay.
was working me through and doing this. And I found myself getting angry because I was doing 2 or 3 takes to try and get the cue right. And one director said, "Why are you mad at yourself? What's wrong?" I said, I should do better. What? He says, "You do this as well as anybody I've ever seen." And
Wow.
that was my second session. I'd never, like I say, I'd never done this. I have
Right.
the natural abilities, naturally good abilities to be able to use eye mouth coordination. I can also change the voices and with any voice add an accent or a dialect to it.
Right.
And the key things that we need to learn as actors as you become more crafted at this and as you learn the technique better, you need to be able to look at things like the length of the line that they wrote down,
Mhm.
the start code and the end code. How long is the cue? Is the line underwritten or overwritten? And we can,
Right.
after a certain amount of time, you develop the ability to be able to spot that. So I know to slow down or speed up. Um, Sometimes the writers don't do much work on the script because they either don't have time or they're brand new to it, but they
Right.
won't write in the pauses. There will be places where um, you are not on camera.
Huh.
Your character's not on camera, but they don't do what they're supposed to do, which is underline all of the lines.
Right.
So the off-camera lines. So then if it's off camera, all we have to do is worry about the line and the timing, not any sort of lip sync, not do I start the same time? Do we go to the cut? Do we end before the cut? So on and so forth.
Right.
Um, so you run into that sometimes where you don't get the clues from just looking at the script. You have to see it first. That is more time consuming because now we have one or two rehearsal runs and the director will say, well, now that we've seen it, we know to do. And again,
Yeah.
I'm not blaming the necessarily writers are doing something bad or wrong. Quite often they just don't have the time. Somebody hands them a script um, at the last minute.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and there you are with translation problems and no time codes written. Sometimes they give you the opening time code, but not the closed one. So I can't tell how long the cue is. I just have to look at the length of the line and say, it probably is 3 seconds and 12 frames long. Um, so
Huh.
I'll say it with that kind of pace in mind. So these
Right.
are things in my early career that I was picking up as I went along. Okay, we have a frozen picture. Is that me?
Oh, you're I'm still here. It seems your camera has cut out, sir.
Yeah, and I'm hearing you just fine. Do you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes.
Okay, let's go ahead and, okay. Now the little time thing saying, okay, let me sign out and sign back in real fast.
All right. No worries, sir.
Hey, hi again.
Hello. Okay. So
All right,
says
so
that
those of you who have never used Zoom before, this is part of the process.
yes, absolutely. We apologize for the technical delay errors there, guys, but we are working our way around it. We thank you guys so much for your patience. Of course, Mr. St. Peter, you were speaking just a moment ago about how the time codes and everything were kind of off. You were saying how they kind of gave you the beginning time code, but maybe not the ending one, so you had to kind of guess in between.
Yeah. Um, Trusting that the cue is written with the amount of time that you have to work with. Um, you then go ahead and just deliver the line based on the opening code. Plus, they give you the beeps, of course. Um,
Right.
but I don't know when it's supposed to end, so I have to kind of cross my fingers that when they wrote the line, they had this in mind that
Of
the
course.
cue was about this long. It's almost impossible to get it right down for the writer to do that, to put it a line, especially in anime where you don't really have lip sync, you just have flap, 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 flap. Um,
Absolutely.
so we're able to adjust, and with Pro Tools, sometimes they can compress something. So maybe I was off by 4 frames, you know. And remember,
Right.
it's 30 frames per second. So when I
Of
say
course.
off by 4 frames, that is a tiny, tiny amount of time.
Yeah, it's very it's very minuscule in the sense. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And before Pro Tools came out, since they were on video and we didn't have the beep system, we learned by the time code. So you would start your cue at 4 minutes, 12 seconds, and 17 frames.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, and then you would be out by 4 minutes, 16 seconds, and 3 frames. And so those of us who were doing that back then, Richard Epcar, a good example,
Mhm.
those of us who did that uh, we were trained in a very, very sharp way to look at
Right.
the screen. We would have to look up like this at the time code, speak, and make sure we were out by then. Um, and now, when actors, of course, with beeps and with the compression that they can do and all the other things with Pro Tools, in a way, they're spoiled. So when I do a cue, and it's something particularly precise, and I didn't have any help. They
Mhm.
asked me, "My God, how did you do that?" And I said, "Because I'm from the old days. That's how I did that."
That's how it used to be. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's crazy.
that was how we learned. We learned it. It was like, learning to build your own fire instead of being given matches. That's almost that big a difference.
Absolutely. So I would love to kind of shift gears and start talking about some of the characters that you've done, if you don't mind, as you have voiced
Perfect.
many throughout, of course, my childhood and many others. I'd love to start with Digimon, though. You have voiced Wormmon, one of the cutest Digimon and one of the most just absolutely adorable Digimon out there.
I
You've also
know. Little Merman.
Oh my goodness. You've also voiced Leomon. You Oh my goodness. I love it. It's
Someone
fantastic.
actually, one of my fans in Tennessee actually crocheted this. This is a crocheted Wormmon.
That is so beautiful.
These are even on wires and stuff like that. Okay, we'll get back to Wormmon later, but I know. Come on.
That is fantastic. Of course, you've also done Leomon, you've done Diaboromon, you've done Caramon, you've done Infumon, and just recently, I've gone back and watched the Digimon movie, the original one, to kind of see how you did the three voices for Caramon, Infumon, and Diaboromon, changing in between. And I'd love to know how you came up with the voices for those three iterations, because I listened back and Caramon sounds a lot different than the final version, Diaboromon.
What happens there is, first of all, I was cast because of what I do with the monster voices, the various things that I bring to them. So I didn't audition. They just called me and said, "We have one for you." Now they were thinking in terms of Kokomon. Um,
Right.
but yes, the other characters. What happens there is, and actually a good parallel for that would be like Wormmon digivolving to uh, Stingmon.
Oh my gosh.
I happen to have. I don't have every character here with me, by the
No,
way.
I was just about to
These are a
say,
couple of
please
them.
keep pulling them down. I love it. Oh my goodness. You have to forgive me. The fan inside of me just cannot help but smile.
Oh, that's okay. Let me see here.
Oh
Yeah,
my
here we
goodness.
go.
Oh my goodness, Leomon.
Yeah, somebody. I don't know where the button is, but somebody gave me one that's called Team Leo. I thought it was just so cute. So,
That is amazing.
and yeah, I have fans that call me Papa Leo. So they're really big Digimon fans, and I love Papa Leo. That's a great nickname. Uh, the reason I bring that up with Wormmon to Stingmon, when a character is going to digivolve, morph, whatever you want to call it, but when they would
Right.
digivolve, we would want to retain some of the character's qualities, but add something else.
Of course.
So when I went from Wormmon, I kept the tremolo, the way the voice moves like this. So when I digivolved to Stingmon, so I kept this quality in there. So that
Right.
shaky tremolo that I use, I kept that as part of the voice for Stingmon. And I changed the placement, did some other things. Whenever they have a character that is going to do that, to digivolve more for whatever the story calls for, in my case, I like to maintain some of the quality of the first character. Um,
Yes.
so then, in the case of Stingmon, he's bigger and he flies and he does all sorts of things. So you want to have more force and more volume in that particular case.
Right.
Um, Going from, for instance, Caramon and then having a Diaboromon, I wanted to make sure to vary those greatly. And that has a lot to do with the placement, the way you use the pitch, and
Right.
also the way you do your pronunciations. So
Right.
Wormmon was very much like this. And Stingmon, you see this, it's much more animated.
Of
So
course.
that's how you can differentiate from one character to another. And then when they ask you for the kind of voice they're after, you come up with an idea that fits their pictures, fits their audio pictures, you might say.
Right. So that, yeah, like I could not thank you enough for those voices. Like, you know what I mean? As you were just doing them, that was absolutely fantastic. Again, my fan inside of me is very much alive and screaming right now. 10-year-old me would never believe this. That is for sure. But definitely want to move to something that I grew up with, which was of course Battle Beat 'em On. I grew up with that show, and you voiced Armada and Marta B, of course. And I'd love to talk to you about the voice of Armada, because that man was the basically the teacher throughout the show. He was very wise, very becoming. And I'd love to know if there was any like recording sessions from that show or anything from that show that you remember specifically. I'd love to hear some memories about it.
Well, one story I like to tell is something that has to do with finding the character and knowing the character when you are going in to do a session.
Right.
You're quite right. You're actually, that's a very apropos um, description of Armada. The wise one, the counselor, the one that watches out for the kids a lot of the times,
Absolutely.
and not to the degree of Leomon, you will not harm these children, you know,
No,
but there was an element of that where he was almost like Uncle Armada. Um,
absolutely.
he was also a little bit of a doofus, which was kind of fun too. Uh, but there were things about him that I really enjoyed. The fact that he was the learned one. Um,
Right.
that story I like to tell regarding the character and the old story. My character would never say that. You want to come up with a better line rather than just "I refuse to say these words" like they do in TV.
Right.
I would never do this. My character wouldn't rewrite it. That case where one of the kids did something amazing. I think he won a game. I can't remember, but I said
Of
the
course.
line they wrote for me was "Booyah." Now,
No. No,
learned.
I'm sorry. I don't see that being something that Armada would say. I apologize. It's just
Oh no, it's quite all right. It was a problem for me too. Um, Now, granted, maybe it's trendy to talk that way, but a character like that, with that kind of upbringing and cultivation,
and the
um,
wisdom behind him.
absolutely, yeah. And I gave the voice that I used for exactly that reason. I wanted this to sound like somebody who did have an advanced education, a very, very
Right.
Ivy League feel about it. So,
Yes.
you know, somebody at Harvard is not going to say "booyah." Okay, I don't hear Armada, the professor from Princeton, saying "booyah." So
No. No.
yeah. So when the time came, I didn't even say anything. I just waited for the line to come up, and the cue came up, and I said "splendid," and the director just thanked me on the spot. We didn't even discuss it. He just said "thank you," and we went on.
That was
Because,
awesome.
well, you see, a lot of times the directors become very, very well acquainted with every character and the storyline and what each character means to something. So
Right.
whereas he didn't write the episode and he wouldn't want to rewrite it and step on anybody's toes, at the same time he recognized exactly what I recognized. This doesn't fit the character.
Right.
So I put it in there. And now there are other times where I will say a line and then there's an alternate cue. And sometimes it's the alternate cue, like Naruto. We have to change the cues that have the word "kill" in them. We're not allowed to use that at 4 o'clock in the afternoon for the kids who just came home from school. Okay.
Right.
So when you hear the original writing on, if it's something playing along on Toonami, Adult Swim, wherever it might be, you will hear us saying many of the original lines because that's designed more for the more grown up and mature audience that's watching it.
Of
Um,
course.
so I had a line as Kurama one time where I said, "Do not kill Naruto," and I didn't catch it at the time. I didn't even think about it, and neither did the director.
Right.
And so we had to come back in a couple of months later because we record these things. We don't know how long it'll be before they go on. We had to come in a couple of months later and do what is called a network alt. Okay. So the
Okay.
alternative cue for the network is the one we're going to do if we know it has to play somewhere else, as opposed to, pay-per-view or something like that. As
Yeah.
one actor once said, if you're going to buy cable, then you're paying for the privilege of being offended by the language. You don't have to do that. You are paying for it, okay?
Right.
But on the other hand, like I say, the kids are home from school. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and so we changed it to "Do not destroy Naruto." In a case like
Ah,
that, destroy was a way of kind of saying, don't defeat him or wipe him out or something like that. It's
right.
just kill is very, very, striking as a word. Yeah.
And again, it was especially to that age group. Do you know what I mean? As you were saying, it's not that more mature audience like us today. Do you know what I mean? Who could
Oh, yeah.
handle and watch that and are more accustomed to that in our animes now. But definitely that's actually really, I never knew about that kind of alt. So thank you for that insight. I really appreciate it.
Oh, sure. A lot of times the alt in the script will simply be another way of saying something, or
Right.
the sync fits better with the line that they chose, but the alt line is a better line. It just won't
Okay.
sync up. It won't sync up as well.
Right.
So one of our solutions when it comes to that, since they're giving us a choice, record them both. Okay. Yeah, the A take and the B take and the C take and the D take. And sometimes you'll do four and they'll say, all right, let's go with C and put A as an alternate. And so we have other
Okay.
solutions in those cases where it's not a matter of whether the language is a problem, or the verbiage or something like that. It's simply they give us different ideas. Sometimes I like the alternate cue better, and I will
Right.
ask, can we record that one? Or are we going to do the alt? But on the other hand, if they say, no, it's just an alt, we don't think it's a problem. Okay, I'm not the
Perfect.
boss here.
Right. Absolutely. So I'd love to shift gears a little bit and, of course, start talking about something I know you've probably talked about 100 times over, which is, of course, Kingdom Hearts, which is the poster behind me here. You voice the voice of Xemnas. He made his first appearance in Kingdom Hearts 1 as a mysterious figure, but really came to be in Kingdom Hearts 2, as we see. And I'd really just love to know a little bit more about that character because for me, I've grown up with him. Kingdom Hearts 2 was where I started in the story. And so my brother and I, we never got along until actually he saw me. He came into the room one day and he was actually seeing Xemnas on screen. He was talking to Roxas outside of the mansion there just before the memories were recollected and Sora reawoke. Again, I don't want to give too many spoilers just in case there are those out there in Kingdom Hearts 2 that have not played the game and are still
Oh,
interested in it.
thank you.
But I do want to ask, of course, just if you could talk me through the creation of that character and what that character means to you and how you've seen the story play out. Like, did they tell you about the story beforehand? Was it just given to you as the games came out? I just love to know more about it. And I apologize that maybe that question wasn't as structured as it should be.
That's quite all right. Part of the problem with Kingdom Hearts going over the amount of time that it has, it's
Right.
very hard to keep track of so many things. And like a lot of good stories, it's also an intricate story. In other words, it's complicated.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Very,
I
very
was,
much so.
yeah, and they didn't give me a whole lot in terms of the background story. Most
Right.
of the time, we don't, whether it's anime or games, they give us a little bit of a background. Um,
Huh.
this is a world where yada yada yada. Okay.
Right.
In this world, you play a kind of a wizard, and wizards are able to do this, but they can't do that. They can do this only when they're riding with dragons, but if they're not riding on a dragon, they can't do it. So they say, and then okay, 1, 2, 3, let's start recording. So they give you a little bit. I got practically nothing on Kingdom Hearts. Uh,
Wow.
they told me kind of where I stood within the story. I was one of the leaders in Organization 13. I was one of the uh, bigger, badder, shall we say, characters.
Right.
Um, Now, that does reflect itself in your performance, but you have to remember as an actor, you are not approaching a character as a villain because you are the character. You want what you want.
Mm.
It's not villainous and evil to you. So you have to remember when I approach something as Xemnas,
Yeah.
if we are in search of something, if we are in search of someone, um, and we find them, we finally track them down, or they find us because we waited for them, that kind of stuff.
Right.
There are goals in mind, there are things in mind, within a scene, within a storyline. Where do we go from here? Where have we just been, and what's going to happen right now? if you view your character as being something, just villainous, that kind of makes it very two-dimensional.
I apologize for the inconvenience again.
Hey, it's all Zoom's fault. That's my philosophy. Always blame Zoom, so.
Always blame Zoom. Fair enough. All right, my friend. All right. We'll count in
Mom is
from
always with us. Okay. Um,
absolutely. All right.
yeah. So, um, going through the character of Zemnis, and again, the way you put it, how it evolves, how things go from throughout the storyline, essentially.
Right.
When I say I don't like to view Zemnis as a villain, it allows me to maintain a lot of the textures. Um, you will notice that sometimes Zemnis actually sympathizes a little bit with someone.
100%.
Yeah. So if, for instance, I was to be addressing someone that I thought had been betrayed by his friends, I would bring that up.
Right.
And and again, I don't remember lines of dialogue necessarily, but I remember there are parts of the story that are like that.
Of course.
As the character and the character's arc, the way the storyline and the plot line go on the way through three, you really do see, I think, more dimensions to characters like Zemnis and some of the other villains too.
Oh,
Um,
100%.
yeah, we're not just all going, trying to go out and take over the world for no particular reason. All the mad scientists that were ever in the movies always want to take over the world, but they don't say why. You
Right.
know, is it money, women, all the wine they can drink, whatever. So there's a lot to do with remembering that your character has certain goals and desires, and that will affect, it will kind of inform the way you perform your character. Very important to keep in
Absolutely.
mind, again, that you don't make a moral judgment or a quality judgment about the person you are. You pursue what the writer has given you to go after.
Absolutely. And again, we just could not thank you enough for what you've done for that character. As you were saying, again, I don't want to spoil too much for anybody who has not finished 3 or any of the games really, but I want to say that there were moments, especially in that series, where I really sympathized with Zemnis. There were
Mm.
definitely moments in that moment because, as you said, the organization's goals became clearer throughout the series. Like they were kind of like I don't mean to say they were just there, and I mean no disrespect when I say that, but at first it was kind of like, why are they there? But as the story progressed, you found out very quickly, and it was very easy to sympathize with them and understand why they were doing the things they were doing. So I cannot thank you enough for the character that you've brought to life there, and I can't wait to see what the future holds for the series and potentially for the character. We never know.
Yes.
um and I was actually about to ask, like, do you know if you're going to be brought back at all for any, like, maybe cameo or another role at all? Or
I haven't been approached about anything. Nomuro-san has been kind of tight-lipped about it,
of course.
understandably so.
Right.
And sometimes it's a question of the creator not being able to do anything because the client, in this case, Disney, Square Enix, blah, blah, blah,
Yes.
is going to say, don't tell them anything, even if we're working on something. Let us do that. So if they put a glossy in uh, a trade newspaper,
Mhm.
um, and there's a glossy section that says Kingdom Hearts 4 coming soon, or something like that, they will do that sort of thing. We're not allowed to talk about it. I simply haven't been approached. I can tell you that much. Basically, I'm telling you that I don't have anything to report.
Of course. Well, we appreciate the insight, sir. Thank you so much for that. But kind of shifting gears, I actually have to ask you, throughout all of the voices that you've done, are there any particular characters that you hold very near and dear to your heart? Some that just like you really stay attached to throughout all this time?
Oh, I don't think so. I can't imagine what you're talking about. This I can't imagine anybody getting connected to a character or feeling really, um, loving toward them. But um, yeah, definitely Wormmon. my little guy, the sweetest little thing ever. Um, uh, from Cowboy Bebop Punch. This was
Oh my
such,
goodness.
yeah, it was so bizarre and strange. Um, and at the same time, we all fell in love with it because it was so bizarre and strange. Um, Leomon, a lot of affection for the big guy. Um,
Right.
and yeah, in a way, Zemnis, in a sort of very chill way. I've gotten very attached to him, yes.
You actually mentioned a character that I was going to bring up, which is Punch from Cowboy Bebop. My goodness, what a character that is, sir. You have to understand, the first time that I heard his voice, I thought I was going crazy because I was hearing two different accents in the same sentence. And I just love to know how you came up with that wacky, crazy character and that amazing voice to follow.
Well, our dear departed friend Kevin Seymour was the one who was pretty much the exec producer.
Right.
And he was, I don't know if he auditioned other characters. I was not auditioned. He just came to me. He said they gave me a breakdown of the various characters and, you know, blah, blah, blah. I've chosen people or I have some people in mind or whatever. But they gave me this one and you were the only one I could think of that could do it. And
Wow.
he said they want him to be like he's from Texas, but they want him to sound Mexican too. Can you do two accents at one time? And I said, well, no, you can't. I said, but I will change accents in the middle of a sentence for you. And he was,
Okay.
now I didn't do that over the phone. We didn't actually do any of that until I got into the first session.
Right. Right. Of
And
course.
so I told the director what I was going to do. And that was Mary Elizabeth McGlynn. Um, and my God, the number of times we had to stop sessions because we were all laughing was just amazing. Uh, the poor thing was just thinking, we're going to get letters about this. It's just, I'm kind of surprised we even got away with it. I thought any moment somebody's going to step in and say, no, 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 you can't do this. You can't do this, you know. But I got that idea. I said, you really can't combine two accents at one time. You would then have a completely different accent, you know,
Right.
or dialect as the case may be. So what I did was I told them, um, I will make sure to pick the places very carefully um, and make sure that they don't lose the sense of the line. In other words, the dialogue is going to still make sense.
Of
The
course.
characters on Bebop need to be able to understand what we're talking about, you know.
Right.
So when I said, hey, we got a real new one right here, and it's a real doozy, you know. So they had to be able to hear what I was talking about and how I would mix the line up. I would sometimes throw Spanish in there where it wasn't called for. Um,
Okay.
like the recording I did, or the recording that I do when I'm at a convention, if you want to have me record a phone message for you. Um,
Right.
People, you know, I always find a place like a stairwell or someplace quiet, and I finish the message up by saying "Adios, mi compañeros," you know, and so people go, "What?" You know, goodbye, my companions. But the nice thing is, um, it does do really. I like to sort of do service to the language and the accent, but at the same time, remember that I am a Texan cowboy. You know, so
Absolutely.
the way they put that together, the uh, uh, production itself, they said they wanted this to be that sort of fake Western because there we are on, you know, fake horses and bouncing up and down and junk like that,
Yeah.
you know, and Judy wearing a vest but nothing under it, that kind of thing. That's not going to
Yeah.
happen, you know. Uh, so it was this ridiculous thing, but it was a lot of fun. It was a really insane part of the production, and you always ask, you know, Watanabe-san if he would be, you know, where he got the idea, if he would be okay doing the show without that element of it. And in fact, uh, that was one of the highlights of the show, which we didn't really, you know, predict.
All right. So we were talking about Punch, sir. We were talking about those crazy characters. And so I have to know around more about that character. You were just talking about that, so I would love to if you could continue on with that conversation.
Oh, sure. When Kevin Seymour had contacted me, he knew I was the guy with the accents and the dialects. Now, the director wanted to make sure that this was kind of cheesy and not very good. So she said, don't be too good with the accents. We want it to be kind of ridiculous. Like they told this actor they want that, but they don't know how to do it. And he
Right.
doesn't really know how to do it. So that's one of the reasons it was so insanely funny, and all the switching back and forth with the accents and the crazy dialogue that we have. Um, there was one particular place where we were talking about how the guy that they were after had a disc,
Yeah.
and the disc was what they were after.
Okay.
So capture the guy.
Yeah.
Well, the guy's dead. And so the question then was, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you fine, sir.
I'm seeing my picture froze again.
I yes.
We'll continue.
Okay.
So, oh, let's see. Lost my train of thought there for a moment.
No
Mary
worries.
was talking to me. Mary was talking to me about the character and not being too good with the accent. Oh yeah, there was a part where we had to capture this guy because we had a disc,
Right.
and the thing was, he got killed, and the question, would that be okay? And they gave me this written statement as Punch to read, and you can tell Punch is not a very good actor or reader because he has this confused look on his face. I'm saying there is no precedent for this. However, I finished the lesson or
Right.
the message, and Judy says, "In English, please." And I said, "No bounty for no computer, no way," you know. And so away with it, but also continuing the storyline because that was right. They had to bring the man in, and he had
Right.
to be alive. I don't recall in the series if there was ever a dead or alive um, uh, situation where as long as you brought the body and you could collect all the Wulongs. I don't remember that, you know, if there was ever one like that.
Well, Paul, I just want to quickly thank you for everything that you have done for my childhood, for everybody's childhood throughout your entire career. You have done some fantastic work, amazing work, and I cannot thank you enough for all that you've done. I'm just curious if you could do something for us to close us out here. Just personally, I'm
Sure,
wondering if you could send out the message, may your heart be your guiding key as Zemnis.
sure. Are we ready? Okay.
Absolutely.
May your heart be your guiding key.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Paul St. Peter. Paul, thank you so much for joining us here today. This interview has been fantastic. Had some technical difficulties, but we've pushed through. We've gotten through it. I cannot thank you enough for all of your patience with us and everything else. And guys, be sure to follow his amazing work. Be sure to go and follow him on Twitter and thank him personally for everything that he's done for you guys. Paul, thank you again.
Thank you, Franklin. Thank you, Broly. Sorry we have to put you through this. And I hope you can lift out the sound and do everything we want to do there. And again, let's do this again,
Absolutely, sir. Thank you so much for your time.
but not on a Monday. All right.
All right.
For the Hokage, I will destroy